Okay, aside from the ones in the back of the book, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 of these multiple step proofs. I don't know if we're going to get around to all of them tonight. If we don't, I'll restrict the testable ones. But this is number 1. Modus ponens, modus tollens, absorption, hypothetical syllogism, disjunctive syllogism, constructive dilemma, simplification, conclusion. It's right there. Now, I don't know if I've ever mentioned this, but if a conclusion does exist somewhere in the premises, it's not 100% of the time that it's going to be extracted. It's almost 100% of the time. But until you find out that it can't be done, if the conclusion does exist in the premises, that's your plan, to extract it. How do you think we might get C out of that dot? Simplification. You can't just do it right now though, right? You have to get C dot D out of that wedge. How do you plan on getting C dot D out of that wedge? There's only one way. Dysfunctional? Disjunctive syllogism. What do you need as the second premise for that disjunctive syllogism? Here's our plan so far. Simplify C out of C dot D. First we have to get C dot D out of the wedge in line 2. And we already determined disjunctive syllogism will get C dot D out of the wedge in line 2. Now I'm asking you, what do we need as a second premise for that disjunctive syllogism? Curl A. Curl A doesn't exist. There's only one way to create a curl. What is it? Modus tollens. That's all you need to know. That's it. In reverse order. Simplify C out of C dot D. Extract C dot D out of the wedge. Now in the last two, it would be the first two steps, the order, the sequence of them may be a question. But you can always figure out what has to come first. Okay, work on that for a while. Supposedly attending a webinar. Yep. There's an extra step. What? I don't know, maybe. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4. I say it's 4 steps. Let's start working on it. You must be this far, at least. Or maybe even this way. I mean, we just talked that out, right? How do we say we're getting curl A? The only way you can create a curl? What do we say? So we need a horseshoe whose antecedent is A. And whose second premise is the negation of that consequent. Do we have a horseshoe whose antecedent is A? We sure do. I'm so sure that line 1 is this first premise of modus tollens. I'm going with it. That means our second premise has to be curl B. All you have to do is get curl B. So we started out by noting that C could maybe be simplified from C dot D. Prior to that, C dot D would have to be extracted from that wedge by disjunctive syllogism. Second premise of disjunctive syllogism would have to be curl A. We reasoned there's only one way to create a curl. It doesn't exist. That's by modus tollens. We need a horseshoe whose antecedent is A. And we have one. So that led us to believe that curl B is our second premise of modus tollens. And we have one step to play with.
It's another simplification.
It's another simplification. Thank you. Is that correct? It is correct. I think I'm running out of space up here. So I'm just going to write that. My people at home can't see that high on the board. We'll just start lower, huh? Well, are we done? I'm not writing in my numbers. Sort of. That has to happen first. That has to happen next. Get rid of those parentheses when you yank that dot out of 2. Okay, so one more time. Our plan originally was to simplify C out of C dot D, simplification. First, that dot had to be taken out of the wedge. Figured disjunctive syllogism would do that. Our second premise has to be curl A. Don't have curl A. Have to create a curl by modus tollens. There's only one way. We reasoned we would need a horseshoe whose antecedent is A, and we have it. So on that assumption, we said our second premise of modus tollens has to be curl A. I'm sorry, curl B. And there's curl B right there. So simplify, modus tollens, simplify. Oops, disjunctive syllogism, simplify. Questions about that one? All right, getting my second win. Number 2. Wow, a lot of things to play with here. Let's look these over real quickly. A dot for simplification. We could have F horseshoe G right now if we wanted it. A conjunction of 2 horseshoes for constructive dilemma. Perhaps we can obtain G wedge I. Another dot for simplification. We could have F wedge J right now if we wanted it. And then a horseshoe. You know everything we could do with a horseshoe. Much. Here we have a disjunction, a wedge that does not exist anywhere in our argument or in the premises. So we're thinking, or we know, that the last step is either addition or constructive dilemma. Let's eliminate addition real quick here. Okay, look. If this is going to be the conclusion of addition, we need, as a premise, G. G only exists one place in the argument, line 1. There are 2 good things about this. It's in the left-hand conjunct of a dot, so we could simplify that horseshoe out of the dot, and then extract G by modus ponens. We would need F as the second premise of that modus ponens. F only exists in 2 places, line 1 and line 3. In line 1, it's the antecedent of a horseshoe. And you all better know by now that you can never touch the antecedent of a horseshoe. Here, although that wedge could be simplified from the dot, F is the left-hand disjunct of a wedge. And you should know by now that we cannot at present touch the left-hand disjunct of a wedge. We can with our next 10 rules, but that's 2 weeks from now. We can't touch that F. We can't touch that F. So G's not coming out of here, and addition is kaput. So now you know what the last step of the proof is. It is? That's right, constructive dilemma. Start drawing it out. Is that the plan? The plan? Now, you could either, you've got more information here than you do here, and not just because it's longer. You've got those two components that you know. And we do see two horseshoes, whose consequents are G and K respectively. Right? Yeah, then that's them. You could also take the approach, if not that, there's only one wedge that I could possibly touch in that whole argument, and it's F wedge J. So I'm going to assume that this is F wedge J, and then fill in the top premise. Either approach is good. Let's take the approach that F wedge J is going to be our second premise. Very safe assumption. It's a relatively short proof. It's the only wedge we could touch. You can't get to this one. And we know we need a wedge for our second premise of constructive dilemma. So let's make that assumption. On that assumption, we'll take out those variables and complete our first premise. But both of those have to be obtained somehow in order to pull the trigger on our constructive dilemma. Any idea on how to get either one of those? Yes?
You get a F wedge J through a simplification of the third premise. And you will get the F meet J horseshoe K through the conjunction of
Yeah, your reasoning, look, even if you don't see exactly how to obtain this, all you have to say to yourself is, it's a dot that doesn't exist. There's only one way to make a dot. There's only one way to create a dot, and that's conjunction. You have the conclusion of conjunction, you have the premises. Always, always, always. That's what we need.
the second one already exists, that's number 2.
Now we just have to get F horseshoe G.
Another simplification of this first premise.
Does it matter in what order we get this or this? See, here's a case where the order in which we figured it out, I don't think it's going to be exactly reversed in the proof, is it? Because don't we need both of these right away? Maybe not.
You need the simplification of the conjunction first.
Oh, yeah.
For you to get the conjunction, you need to simplify the first premise first.
Right, so this is in the correct reversed order, isn't it? It's just that this is what throws me. We can have this anytime we want to. Right?
I got that.
All right, let's get it first. Then you went about putting your conjunction together, right? And simplification here had to happen first in the making of the conjunction. So maybe my numbers here aren't going to make sense. Five two. There we go. Questions about that?
It doesn't matter what order, right? You put the simplification. When you look at the our papers and you're grading, you should be able to see, like you figure out what order we put it in, right?
Well, I'm going to know if you did it correctly.
Right. Even
If there's more than one sequence possible, I'll know that they're both correct if you've done them correctly. Yeah, absolutely. If there's more than one sequence possible, I'm not insisting on a particular sequence. If there's more than one proof possible in the same number of steps, I'm not insisting on a particular proof. I'm insisting on a proof in the indicated number of steps done correctly. Yes.
In line number 6, I thought you're not supposed to bring over the parentheses.
Are you suggesting we write that? That's a meaningless statement. Don't know if it's a conditional statement defined by that, a conjunction, or a conditional statement defined by that. We're adding parentheses here. See, they don't exist here because they're not needed. And they don't exist here because they're not needed. When you put those together in conjunction, they're needed. Then we supply them. I think you're being confused with this. Look here. We're taking a component that's punctuated out of a larger statement. Right here. You see the parentheses there. Well, then it's us to drop those parentheses. Because out of that larger statement, they're incorrect. So we either take them away as necessary or add them as necessary. Here, we're taking them away as necessary. Here, we're adding them as necessary. How we doing? Good? Next. Easy one. Confidence builder. Okay, let's see. Four steps. I want everybody to find the setup here. Two premises that can be used right now in one of our rules of inference. What are they? What's the rule? And what conclusion would we draw? Modus tollens. What lines? 2 and 3, right? Right? And what would our conclusion be if we use those as the premises of modus tollens? What would it be? Curl and. We could have curl and right now if we wanted to. You see that conclusion? Curl O? Does it exist in the premises?
On the first premise.
That's not a curl O.
Oh, I think we're just talking about if O exists.
No, curl O, our conclusion, curl O. Does that exist? No, then it has to be created. How do you create a curl? Go. All you need to know. We all agreed that that's our last step? Yeah? Now, one of those two, we already noticed how we can get it, right? Which one of those can we obtain anytime we want?
Berlin.
Let's go ahead and get that. We can do it at any time. And how are we going to get that? That exists in line 2. That exists in line 3. We could make curl n just about any line on this group, I think. Oh, wait. Oh. I think we're going to have to get it early on. We'll see. We'll leave these numbers out for now. What about O horseshoe N, which exists in line 1? Modus ponens? Second premise? All you have to do is say to yourself, well, two things. It's not coming out of there because it's the antecedent of a horseshoe. Therefore, it is again a dot that doesn't exist. So, how do you make a dot? There we go. And you know what the premises have to be. Curl M exists in line 3. Curl N, well, we're going to use that for something else, aren't we? So I say we do this first, right?
You have to go modus tollens, then the conjunction, then the modus ponens to complete the modus tollens again.
We want that to be 4.
Do we have to use the conjunction?
What?
Is it okay if I use the simplification instead?
What simplification?
You
Never
can't
mind, I did that wrong.
Until his death in 1961. Here from that new Chandis recording of chamber music, 5 English composer York Bowen.
So we're going to make this 5 because we need it for this. That's going to be 6.
Can't do the work.
Okay, look, let's see. What, you get lost on the numbers?
I never leave enough room for myself to do the work, and I just get pissed. Like that's what's been happening to me. Yeah, the work is so sloppy that
We don't get pissed in. Oh, my work is sloppy?
No, mine.
Oh,
I
my work
cannot-
is too sloppy.
I cannot organize my work with
I
these.
apologize about it. But I don't know if I mentioned this in this class or not, but it has to do with keeping your numbers straight.